have 4 guiding principles for governance. The first is customer centricity. This is very popular in public sector right now, and it's very important for the LTSA's strategy. So what this is really putting yourself in the customer's shoes. We want them to have the knowledge and education they need, as well as considering how our changes will impact them. Enhance usability. So we want to make information more reliable, useful, and usable, and get it to the right people in the right amount at the right time. And we also want to optimize and streamline our processes. Represent the employee's perspective. So this goes hand in hand with customer centricity. Employees can be considered our customers in terms of knowledge as well. And so what we want to do here is put ourselves in the employee's shoes. And seek organizational alignment. So this is all around connecting knowledge management with the broader strategy of the LTSA. So we want to make sure that we're aligned with the different initiatives in the LTSA and creating a unified culture. So we've developed a governance model, and this is a very, very high-level governance model. So the KM network is really everyone in the organization, and possibly some external stakeholders as well. We want everybody to be aware of it, to use knowledge, and continue to engage with the rest of the governance model. The core team is are the people that do the day-to-day work on this, and they're also the knowledge champions. The KM Steering Committee, which we have established, consists of 4 executives right now. So they make the high-level strategic decisions around resourcing and funding and any other strategic decisions that need to be made. Processes. So processes need to be developed to find, create, capture, update, share, and remove knowledge. So this is a sample content management life cycle. So it's a pretty standard life cycle. What I can say right now is the LTSA stops around the 4th box. So we stop at publishing. We don't really expire, archive, delete, or purge. So I'll give you a little bit of an example here. So we use SharePoint, and our knowledge is PDFs and document libraries. We developed a knowledge base when a bunch of management level people were retiring, so we wanted to capture that knowledge. So we ended up putting a bunch of documents into this knowledge base in PDF forms. We just kept adding to it. There was no content lifecycle. We didn't get rid of anything. We just kept adding. So that's a piece of our cycle that we need to improve upon. Content. So content is the knowledge itself, without which there would be no need for knowledge management. So we've done some preliminary investigation in terms of identifying different content types. What we need to do now is identify all of the content types, see where there's any gaps, and prioritize those content types. This is a sample content maturity model. Right now, the LTSA, we think, is in the siloed stage. So we have some knowledge management practices. They're applied inconsistently across the LTSA. What we're hoping to achieve is the evolving state, where there's a single standard applied across the organization. The operational stage we see as a steady state, and the optimal stage for the LTSA would be a single platform and a single standard for all of our knowledge management. So we want that single source of truth for both internal and external stakeholders. Technologies. So technology is the vehicle used to store and make knowledge accessible and to allow people to work together without being together. So successful KM technology ecosystem allows people to talk and share knowledge, people to search and retrieve knowledge, people to synthesize knowledge from many different sources, and people to easily capture and structure new knowledge in a variety of contexts. And this is a model ecosystem of KM tools. So there's a bunch there, lots of words on this slide. So I'll just skip past it. And so the next slide shows what the LTSA has. So the white boxes are the boxes that we are either developing right now or we don't have yet. So we have a lot of these tools. One of the things that is problematic is we're not using the tools that we do have broadly across the organization. So we're using them ad hoc in different departments. Metrics. So metrics are used to monitor and measure performance of all aspects of the KM system. So in terms of defining metrics, we want to improve employee and customer satisfaction, increase knowledge sharing activities, increase content publishing and search, and increase adoption and numbers of users of KM tools. So in defining our metrics, that will be up to our steering committee. We've definitely thought about what types of measures we could use, both qualitative and quantitative. But again, that will be a decision that the steering committee will make. And so now I'll hand it over to Daniel to go over our recommendations and some of the issues we're facing.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And I just want to say that this was the first conference where Lisa gave a presentation, so maybe if you could join me, give her a round of applause.
Thank you. It's all over now.
Very well done, Lisa. Very, very well done. So it's now my job to share with you some of the recommendations along the framework that Lisa described that we've seen over the last year. So the first recommendation that we went forward to the steering committee was to really focus on prioritizing people-based information. The LTSA has a number of people who've spent many, many years diving deep into issues around land title and having experience and expertise that no one else at the organization possesses. And without a simple people finder, even just names and telephone numbers, there's been a lot of examples where people don't know how to get in touch or don't even know that people exist within the organization. It is also an organization that has multiple offices, and I think as everybody in the audience can appreciate, sometimes even just a simple office change or multiple offices leads to a bit of a blindness on knowing who you work with. That can be a real challenge. So we definitely wanted to focus on making sure that the people data was high quality. We definitely want to figure out a way to improve the ability to locate experts in the organization, and also use that people information to force content ownership upon people to assist with the notion of content continuously being created, people perhaps exiting the organization and then having, after the fact, tons and tons of orphaned content that just seems to grow and grow and grow. So we feel that the first priority recommendation is to really sort out and prioritize people-based content and people-based information. Below there, you can see some of the mock-ups that we've got just to sort of present to leadership what we're thinking about. And I can see in the audience we have a colleague of ours, Zeke Irabar, who's actually on the team as well, who's going to be helping us to make this so within our SharePoint platform. Nice to see you, Zeke. The second part is around governance. The way Lisa described it earlier is we are in the startup governance phase, so as you can see, it's a bit chaotic, lots of little bubbles there. But we are happy to report we do have a steerco in place. We also have a project team, small yet mighty. And what we're really trying to do is over the next, pick your time frame, year, likely, to move to more of a steady state governance, which would include identifying a person in the organization that's named as the knowledge management leader, perhaps grow the knowledge management team, which I'll share a little bit of information about how that's actually occurred already, and then figure out, as Lisa described, how to formalize the network of individuals within the LTSA that are considered part of the KM network, both internal to the organization and external to the LTSA as well. For processes, these three manuals that are the heart of what the examiners do at the LTSA really need an optimized process for keeping that content up to date. Very, very tricky, very legal-ish type information that really comes from changes in legislation, monitoring questions that are being asked, both of the examiners and the customers, and not really just yet a real great optimized process for keeping that material up to date. And considering that this is the primary source of information that's used for decision making, this really needs a high-level focus. So we do have three: the Land Title Practice Manual, the Examiner Training Manual, and the Survey Training Manual. So what we're doing here is we're trying to figure out how to leverage the technology with SharePoint and workflows to make it easy for that process to be tracked and for that content to be contributed, make it easy for the updates to be made, and actually track versions and make sure that the content has a bit of an audit trail as well. And of course, make it available on the intranet just as a default. So content. We definitely want to prioritize these 6 types of content. We did not do a fulsome content inventory, for sure. But what we do know from hearing and reading some of the reports of what has been fed back to the team, news information is really important. So understanding what's happening in each of the different offices, what are the priorities coming down from the CEO's office and the leadership team, what's happening perhaps because the LTSA is a public body, they often get mentioned in the news. Certain things can bubble up about things happening in the community, and there needs to be a way to share that with the internal LTSA community. I think everyone recognizes that news is a pretty fundamental content type in any intranet. As I described, the manuals, which is the detailed practice information and guidance information, is definitely a priority content type for us. People information, so creating a directory of people information and contact profiles to use both to identify the owners on the pages of that content that they own, and also allow people to go into the people directory and find people that they need to get in touch with. This seems like it should be something that exists, but I'm sure many of us just struggle with even just getting up-to-date contact information for people. I can see lots of smiles in the audience, which means it's true. Policy information, which again, I'm sure everyone here can realize is really fundamental to most intranets. And what's the #1 policy that people want to look at? The vacation policy. When can I take my vacation? That seems to be, in my experience, the #1 policy everyone wants to see. Maybe the leave policy, I don't know. But again, having accurate policies up to date and available to people when they need them is really, really critical. And then what's the #1 form that people want to look for? Vacation leave form to fill that out. That's, at least in my experience, every intranet I've ever either built or operated, that usually seems to be the #1 form people are always looking for. So you got to make that available to people. But forms information is really helpful to people just in doing their job, depending on which department you're using or coming from, HR, finance, etc. Making it easy for people to submit forms that doesn't require someone to print something off and write it out in pen and paper or pencil and triplicate and mail it or whatever. So there's a great opportunity there to look at some of the forms that are being used and maybe automate some of that input process and approval and workflow around with some of the technologies that we are building and already have in place. And then the knowledge base articles, as Lisa mentioned, there's quite a lot of that material now, and that includes lots of base articles around how-tos, frequently asked questions, and other informational articles that would be helpful to the user. And I'll just pause to say that when we did a bit of analysis of what's there, we realized that I think 80% of what was in the knowledge base was miscellaneous. So, see, gasp, I told you that would happen. That's right, good gasp, I love that. But the 80-20 rule seems to be at play here, where we're like, we wonder what is that 80% that's considered miscellaneous? We got to look into that and figure out how to take that through some of our processes and make that content more valuable, or get rid of it, right? That's the other thing that we potentially need to be doing, or I should say, have to be doing. As Lisa definitely mentioned, one of the great things that we realized was that there was plenty of technology already in place, not necessarily working together, but against the model that we shared around sort of an idealized version of the types of technologies that you would need. What's in blue is what's in place, and then what's in green is what we think could really help. So focusing on expertise location and then instant messaging, again, because you've got a real burning question on grant of timber. I know I always say that one done that some sort of thing in examiners, the grant of timber. There's a lot of topics there, but if you really are sort of trying to find information and you need to find the grant of timber expert and they're available and you can get on an instant message or a video call, it really reduces the barriers and it really improves the ability for people to get the answers to the questions that they need. This isn't to say that learning management systems or even process management systems aren't important, but I think as everybody in the audience can also realize, you have to make decisions and you have to prioritize. So considering we had quite a lot of this already in place, our focus is going to be to do as best as we can to get these systems talking to each other and then adding on the expertise, location, and the instant messaging as well. On the metrics front, we tried to keep it simple. I used to work with someone who was a chief marketing officer that said, when it comes to metrics, curb your curiosity. Because if you don't, and we all know what happens to the cat when it comes to curiosity, you can literally try and measure everything. How many people who are working with intranets have someone publish a page and call 10 minutes later and say, how many people have looked at my page? Anybody have that happen to them? Yes, exactly. So we really tried to put into place a pretty simple metrics framework. We'll see how it goes. We'll report back in 2020 whether we were successful or not. But we put employability and satisfaction as our first goal. And I know that the text here is a little bit small, but what it does say is our key performance indicator of that is a percentage increase in productivity and employee job satisfaction. How are we going to do that? Well, we're recommending the method of using and analyzing existing staff productivity information and measures, and perhaps doing an employee survey or partnering with HR to get that information. HR may already have that information, it's just a matter of connecting that in to see if it's possible that as a result of the program, employee satisfaction and ability increased in the knowledge management arena. We have a target 2% increase. I think that's modest yet achievable. I think, as we all know, trying to figure out what percentage increase you're looking for, the answer usually is, well, thank you, it depends, right? That was a good head, you're like, yeah, exactly. The second one, again, back to our aspiration, was all around customer satisfaction. So we are putting the employee first because they're the ones that need the knowledge to service the employees, pardon me, the customers. And so we're looking at customer satisfaction and looking at an increase of that related to the knowledge management activities. How are we going to do that? Likely through a customer survey that already exists at the LTSA and working with the group that puts out that survey to see if we can add some KM elements to it or hide them as KM elements but not really call it that, and then analyze the data to see if we can get a bit of a baseline increase. We're shooting for 5%. Again, come back to our session in 2020 and we'll report on our results. Right, Lisa? That's right. Okay. And I broke this up into 2 slides here. So this is 2 of 2, again with the recommendation to develop metrics. The third one is around collaboration and alignment, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, this one is going to be a little bit tricky, but we feel like we need to figure this out. So what we're looking for here is a percentage increase in cross-departmental groups and processes. So if we can see that people are talking to each other and or creating processes within departments, we see that as a great thing for improving collaboration and aligning the organization to the strategy that, of course, the CEO and the leadership team have developed. We think that the recommended method to figure that out is to look at sort of maybe during the, within the communities of practice and things, you know, the number of new collaborative groups that have formed, potentially looking at new meetings that are happening. Of course, at this conference, there's lots of talk about using AI, et cetera. So Zeke is, of course, going to be helping us to figure a lot of this out on the technology front. But again, you know, with process optimization, looking at how many of those things have been created across an interdepartmental, using the tools that we have in the knowledge management program, we think is the way that we'll be able to actually get a pretty good measure of that. So we're targeting a 10% increase. Again, come back in 2020 and we'll tell you how we did. The last one is knowledge culture. Might be interesting to try and figure out how do you measure culture. But we're looking at sort of, again, an increase in attitudes and perceptions of the knowledge management culture. And one thing I will emphasize is I was quite delighted when we started working together, Lisa and I, and reported back that there really is a great knowledge sharing culture already at the LTSA. If somebody needs something in the office, you know, the gopher head pops over the cubicle and says, hey, do you know about the grant of timber. I always go back to that as an example. And that already exists. So, when we were sort of thinking about this presentation, we want to make sure that the KM program and what we do does not put up any barriers to that, right? We don't want to make sure that the tools and the processes that we're doing inhibit that, because that will not be a good thing. As a boss of mine previously used to say, there will be tears before bedtime if that's the way that we approach it, which is not what we want to do. So we're thinking about the method for that is sort of assessing, again with surveys, the attitudes and their experiences through existing surveys and collecting some of that data and analyzing it. And again, a sample target of 10%. Anybody, 17%, 13.42% is what we're looking for. We started with some round numbers here. We're kicking off. Again, we'll figure it out and then we'll report back hopefully next year. So this just gives you a bit of a step, literally steps, gotta love PowerPoint, for where we are and some of the steps of how we structured this in the startup mode. So first we figured out how to identify and establish the leadership steering committee. We feel that that's extremely important to keep the knowledge management program alive and have the leadership team help us co-create this. I think we heard this from the keynote the other day and some of the sessions that I've been in. If people are part of the process, they have some skin in the game and they're more likely to see it through to success. So we were really excited that we were able to get a steering committee together and get our burgeoning KM project team together. So we've got that. And where we are now is we're really at sort of where the KM steering committee is reviewing and approving the strategy. And as Lisa reported, which was really exciting only in the last couple of weeks, we got back from all of the steering committee, which is represented, I should say, from the leadership within IT, HR, customer experience, and policy and legal. Correct. So we have a really broad-based representation from the leadership team, which we're really excited about. And we've got the strategy approved, and now we're looking again to what we're showing you today, some of the projects that we need to get underway this year to make it so. Just to give you a sense of what's next, so we're looking at figuring out the project plan, again, scoping those out, making sure that we're not trying to boil the ocean, making it sure that we can actually scope out and do the work that we're promising to do, because we want to make sure that this is successful. And then the last bit of sort of once we've gotten to full kickoff and startup stage is to execute on all those plans. That's the hard part. You got to do the work, right? The ideation and the creativity can be fun, but then, oh gosh, what did we do to ourselves? We did all these plans and we actually have to do the work. But that's going to be really a lot of fun. And as it says here, we're going to make sure that our structure allows us to periodically report back to that steerco, spend a lot of time getting them to feel as though and realize that they're in a decision-making position, bring recommendations to them, and have them help us in a variety of ways with their leadership position. So what were some of the challenges that we faced? I'm a librarian by background, so I love to bucket and classify things. So they're in 3 categories. The first one is leadership and stakeholder engagement. The second is the relationship with IT. And the third is project management and resourcing. Do these sound familiar to anybody in the audience? Exactly, right? See? Head nods. So the first one is leadership and stakeholder engagement. So I've put this in pluses and minuses, and it's a bit high level, but on the plus side, and I started with the plus, not necessarily always the optimist, but I thought we'll start with the positive. We definitely were excited that we had leaders who spent time and realized that they were able to join a steerco. Not a lot of pushback. There's quite a lot of excitement, as Lisa described earlier, from the CEO on down to say this is a problem. We've been told that this is a problem. We need to do something about it. Over to the leadership team to help us. We've heard, and there was a new leader to the organization that came from another organization, and a couple of chats with that person, and they really emphasized that in their former organization, KM was really seen as core to operations excellence. So we were like, great, you're going to join the coalition of the willing and help us as a new leader to the organization. So that we also saw as a real positive thing. The budget approvals, in public sector, I think as everyone, and doesn't matter, public, private sector. Does anyone have unlimited budget? If anyone puts their hand up, I'm going to be very upset. But, we really have been able to get the leadership to buy into what we're trying to do and approve budgets. So that's a really great thing. Let's wrap it up. Everybody go home. We got budgetary approval, right? And the other great thing is, the KM team was the two of us, really, and then we were able to bring someone on board, and then I think we're up to six people at the moment. So we've been able to sort of, thank you, we've been able to bring some other folks from other departments to join our KM team, and we think that's really, really fantastic. The downside, of course, is people making time and being available for meeting. Great head nods, love to see that. Prioritizing decision-making, getting that steering committee to come together, framing up what we need to happen, getting them to make a decision, that's been a bit tricky. I think everyone can recognize this notion of this is a project that's sort of off the corner of people's desks, which can be really difficult to manage. And then a big thing that's kind of looming for us a little bit is the content ownership part. We really haven't quite gotten into that yet, and that's going to be a bit tricky. We just know there's a lot of stuff that is orphaned, and we have to figure out what are we going to do with that stuff. So the relationship with IT, it's always perfect, right? It always works out so well with IT. So the great thing was we had a relationship with IT from the start. They knew what we were up to. They were informed of what we were up to. And we also, pardon me, had awareness at the senior leadership level within IT, which was great. We've been having consistent meetings with them, keeping them in the loop about what's happening, so that really has helped us. The downside, of course, is delays in getting software upgraded. User access has been a bit of an issue, figuring out how to really tell IT or collaborate with IT that this is a priority project and we really do need some assistance. We realized really early on that there was limited in-house understanding of the SharePoint platform and know-how. Enter Zeke Irabar, of course, to help us with that. And of course, as we all have to keep in mind when it comes to IT, there's lots and lots of projects that are going on. We think our project is the most important because it is. However, for IT, they likely have a variety of other projects that are competing with ours, and that can be really, really tricky. Project management and resourcing. We were able to make the case to hire on a person who was skilled in knowledge management and records management, a librarian, to bring on board to really join our team to kind of round out our skill set, which was fantastic. Again, we were happy to report and see that a lot of our budget requests got approval, and we had people who were project managers and named as project managers. That was their role. It wasn't just that there was some loose collection of people that were running a project. They actually had the title of project manager, which is really great. Again, on the downside, of course, project managers having too many projects, which is really tricky for any project manager. Anyone in project manager or a project manager at the moment? Oh, okay, so project managers, they're great. They're great. We can't survive without them, but if they have 5,000 projects on the go and they don't see our project as priority, that can be really tricky. So, enter Lisa Poeckert, who is sort of, as she described, the accidental KMer as a PM and did a really fantastic job of both being assigned this work and carrying it forward, and then bringing us all together to really assist with putting this into place. And then this is something that we see pretty much weekly, is sort of the confusion between the way IT has their project and the way the business has their project. See all the head nods in the audience, right? We've had a lot of trouble with that because they're both different projects, but they're the same leadership team. Some of us are on one project, some of us are on, we're like, which project? And then there's a lot of like convenience de-scoping, scoping of not my project, oh, that's your project. It's like, what, wait a minute. How do we figure this out? So I've been glad to see that there's a lot of head nods in the audience, so I feel like a lot of the things that we're seeing, a lot of you in the audience have tackled. So again, come back for part 2 in 2020 where we'll update you on some of our successes and of course some of our failures, because I think when it comes to knowledge management, not everything is a success, not everything is a failure, but at the same time fail early and fail fast because failure is expensive. So with that, we've got just a couple of minutes, 5 minutes actually, to maybe take some questions from the audience if you have any.
Or I am sure you would like some, if people have ideas about how to contact
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
just had a quick question around
Come on up here, Lisa.
Messenger. So I kind of think of instant messenger as like a knowledge transfer, not necessarily something that knowledge is managed. So how are you kind of doing the implementation of that with your camera?
I missed the first part of your question there, sorry.
So instant messenger, I kind of think that as a knowledge transfer, like instant, right?
Yep.
The manage isn't really, or the knowledge isn't really managed somewhere.
Correct.
So I was just wondering, what does your implementation for that instant messenger look like in your camera?
So the way that we view instant messaging at the moment is a vehicle to improve and make it a lot faster for people to connect. Yes, it will be a content type that does need to be managed, but you know what? We're going to put that as a problem down the road for future Daniel and future Lisa to handle, if I can answer that. But honestly, in the absence of that in an organization with multi-offices, we just see instant messaging as a way for people to rapidly connect without having to pull out a paper sheet, find the phone number, dial the number, la, la, la. So to answer your question, we know that there will potentially be a content problem down the road, but we've got the priority content that we're focusing on, so we see it really as a way to kind of hyper-connect.
Has anybody actually addressed, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
I'm really
Yeah.
concerned for you. I mean, they were kind enough to share a problem, so.
Yeah.
Has anybody, found a good way of addressing this content ownership problem of getting people to take responsibility for content?
I think the big thing with how we manage our knowledge is there's an expectation that the information has to be worked as far as being reviewed on an annual basis. So I think setting that base expectation that it doesn't matter who owns it, we have to go through it, and we have to figure out who actually owns it. So I think by going, hey, we heard you're really great at this, like, we'd like to install our trust in you and utilize you, and both get their trust, but then also pull some of that information out of their head at the same time. And then just knowing that, hey, you might not see me in a year, but next year you'll be getting a call.
Yeah.
So,
And we're at the point, as I said, with the people-based information of just trying to identify who the ownership of the existing base, that's where we're at here, Patrick, right? Absolutely.
So,
You know,
were you in the session before the break, before lunch with
No.
Ivan Butina? So you might want to look at his session on community organizing. and
Oh, yeah.
Volunteers.
yeah, oh yeah, right.
And the other suggestion I had is that Nancy Dixon wrote a wonderful blog post 10 years ago called If the Army can put its doctrine up on a wiki, you've got no excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was they used wikithons. So they pulled the people, they pulled the cluster of types of people who would be responsible for doctrine
Right.
developments
Right.
into a session, a wikithon.
Yep.
And so there's a invitation, you come along, and then you form groups and you
Yeah.
adopt an area of content and you work on it.
Yeah, and some of the other methods I've used in a couple of other similar projects is the content owner group and the content coordinator group, because you have people who are ultimately responsible, but then you have people who actually have to push the buttons and manage it. So that's likely the direction we're going to head in here. But again, we've got a challenge where we have a lot of orphaned content, so we got to scope and bound that and get people to actually own and say, yes, that's mine, because there's a lot of hands-off things that tend to happen. Absolutely.
More questions? Yes?
Yeah.
I was curious about your metric around productivity. That seemed like a really interesting, powerful way to demonstrate value, but I wasn't sure for BC land what productivity might mean with knowledge. I mean, if you get a handle on even some small percentage of that, it'd be a really powerful argument, right? Productivity, even 2%, that's really interesting. How are you thinking about doing that?
So I can take
ahead.
that one. So currently, what we do is examiners examine applications. So they examine a certain number of applications. So that's what we base our productivity on. So the idea is to measure what their productivity is now, and then measure it after we've improved material they rely on to make decisions. So if there's an increase in applications that are processed, excluding other reasons for that increase, that can be shown that they're finding information faster, they're able to get the information they need to make decisions quicker.
And that makes sense, and, this is a tricky one, because there could be other things that drive whether it takes.
Definitely.
But the other thing that I've had success with is, in parallel with that, surveying them on was the content easy to find, was it easy to use, did I find it intuitive, while they're working on individual applications, maybe for a short period of time, just to get some feedback, qualitative feedback?
Yes,
Is that
yeah.
what can help justify the
So if I-
productivity?
That's a really good
jump in
idea.
there, 'cause I have one question. I'm going to sort of jump on the back of yours on the quality of the content, and is it helpful? Because I really liked your 4 guiding principles for governance, and the one thing in your metrics that I didn't see explicitly, maybe there implicitly, was content usability.
Yes. So we had to scope again on the metrics and say, these are the 4 things that we're going for, but I hear what you're saying, the usability.
point.
Yeah, but I know there's a number of methods out there to do simple surveys to ask around usability of content, so I see that as a quick survey method that we could do a benchmark pre and post to kind of handle that,
Well,
absolutely.
I think it's nice to sort of complete the circle. If you've got guiding principles that you can demonstrate.
Come on, y'all, you're increasing scope on our project
That-
here.
That's a really good, that's a very good
Scope
point.
creep! No,
Yeah.
just kidding.
I just jumped on. We can take one
But this
more
is what we're supposed to be doing, we're protect, no, it's
One
all
more
good.
question. Yes.
I'm curious, are you guys taking any questions from employees? I don't know how closely you work with internal communications. I'm in internal communications, but we also manage the internet.
Yeah.
So we have like a ask anything functionality as part of our internet, and we answer that. And it kind of makes us be in a position where we have to like either we know everything about everything or we're connecting people to the right
Yeah.
resources. I'm just wondering if you guys do that because the more research we do about how to do it, we're actually finding that other people aren't providing that service to their employees.
Right.
And it's
Uh,
kind of getting to be unsustainable, so we're
Yeah.
potentially moving it to Gamma so it could be like more open and transparent, everyone help each other as opposed to just being us. I'm just curious how you guys are doing that.
Yeah, I think that we just recently we went under a reorganization, and in our HR department, we used to have a separate communications department, and they only handled external communications, and internal communications was kind of whoever did it. Now we have an HR communications person that does internal communications and is in the same boat that you're describing now. So, and that's a fairly new thing, so that issue might come up with us too. Did you want to add
Yeah,
something to
and
that?
just quickly, we were lucky enough to have a communications person join our team recently. So not only are they going to be on the project team with us, but they're likely going to be a user of the system and going to be representing the need for that. So I would imagine that's going to come at us later on for sure as
Yeah.
a solution to put into place. Yeah.
Can we
Yeah.
thank Lisa and Daniel?